Cortana, all I need to know is, did we lose them?
I think we both know the answer to that.
What's up, guys? Halo Repository back today with another video. Today we are going to be talking about Halo the Flood. So let's just jump right into it. So The Flood was written by William C. Dietz, who, may he rest in peace, passed away earlier this year. Unfortunately, his book is getting a re-release this year with the Master Chief Omnibus. So I think that's just a really good way of honoring his legacy and memory, especially when it comes to the Halo books. The book was released April 1st of 2003. The book itself is the first and currently only novelization of any of the Halo games. In this, book in particular, it is the novelization of Halo Combat Evolved. So let's talk a little bit about William C. Dietz. So William C. Dietz was a science fiction writer. More specifically, according to a Google search, he focused a lot more on military science, as well as game novelizations such as Halo, of course, Mass Effect, Star Wars, StarCraft, etc. So I think when it comes to being the second author to make a book in the Halo franchise, he was actually a perfect fit. Science fiction, military science, Halo, like that is perfect. I did listen to a podcast called Pixel Lot, who actually had a interview with William C. Dietz a few years back, where they kind of just talked to him about writing processes, getting into this type of book and all that kind of stuff. And one thing that was really interesting to see about this is, obviously with how these books work, the authors are kind of given like the idea of what the developers are looking for when it comes to this book. And that was no different for William C. Dietz, and I'm sure it's no different for people like Kelly Gay, Troy Denning, pretty much everyone who has engaged in these books in any capacity. But what I found really interesting about this is Dietz revealed that when he was asked to come aboard and write this book, Bungie originally just wanted a complete novelization of the game. That was it. Nothing else, nothing more. And he kind of was like, oh, that sounds kind of boring. Can I, bring in extra characters, do extra scenes outside of just what's in the game? And from what he said is Bungie agreed to it so long as they obviously approved a lot of things. He couldn't change the lore dramatically, but overall, yeah, they said, sure, go ahead, bring in some extra characters, bring in some side stories. That's fine. And I have to say one thing about that. I will get more into my full thoughts about this book and its characters and some of its writing styles later. But what I will say is I'm glad that Dietz did ask to do that, because this book itself, I don't know how to say it without fully giving away my views. I will just say I'm glad he asked to do that. And I think that that's where the book really shines. And I'll get more into why that is when I get to my full thoughts and everything about the book later on. All you need to know is that Dietz felt like him himself, if he was just writing a story that was already written, I guess, so to speak, with the game, it would have been like a grind. It would have just been like, okay, let me just write what I'm seeing in the game and call it a day. Now, this would go on to be Dietz's only book in the Halo franchise, and I don't know, I didn't fully finish that podcast, and maybe I should have, but I don't know if it's because, this book in itself is highly controversial, especially when it released. A lot of people were kind of like, what's the point of reading this if it's just the game? All those kind of stuff. All I will say is give it a read. It is interesting, and we'll talk more about why that is, for me at least, at the end of this video. Now let's talk about the cover. Now the original cover, stay there, is phenomenal in my opinion. I don't know what it is. As a kid, funny enough, I did not like this cover. I'm just gonna show a picture of it because every time I try to do this, it just blurs out and I'm showing you nothing. The cover itself is really cool because you have it to where it's the Master Chief fighting off Flood infection forms. You have him holding a shotgun. In the very background, you can see like the silhouette of a human Flood combat form screaming at you. And then, of course, with the background, you can see the beautiful ring vista of Alpha Halo. Now, one thing that I'm noticing while looking at just this version, the book itself, is that there is actually a purple hue in the background at the very top of where the ring is that isn't really seen on the actual cover, which is kind of a shame because when you see this full-length picture that I have pulled up, that purple really just adds to the oomph of this that I enjoy. I think that purple hue and then the orange for the flood itself really just adds to like a good representation of this book and of this game. Now, this cover was designed by Eddie Smith and Lorraine McLean, as well as Juan Ramirez, all three people who have had at least some experience with the Halo franchise. Eddie Smith is well known for things like the Halo graphic novel, some of the concept, or at least the cover art for Halo Glasslands, and some other concept art that we've seen that I'll put a picture of right here. Lorraine McLean, we've actually talked about in Halo The Fall of Reach. She was the one who had helped design the original cover for Halo The Fall of Reach itself. And then Juan Ramirez was yet another, 3D artist on the games, who also had a little bit work in the Halo graphic novel, which we'll actually talk about a little bit later. So all in all, I think a great set of people who designed a great cover. The only thing I will say about this is, compared to The Fall of Reach, the Master Chief looks a little wonky. I don't know, I think it's just the way the helmet looks. The helmet just looks really long. I don't know why they just didn't use, like, kind of with The Fall of Reach, kind of just like another pulled out image of a Mark V armor. But I'm not going to complain too much. It was 2003. It fits the style. And it's definitely the inspiration for Halo Parasite's Wake. I mean, if you compare this to Halo Parasite's Wake, the brand new horror Halo novel coming out this year, which also takes place around the same time of, or not around, but in the exact same time of this book, you'll see that like there was definitely an inspiration for not just the Flood, but of course the early 90s anime and like science fiction-y look that I think Halo really had during the Combat Evolved era. Now, like I said, as a kid, I did not like this original cover, which brings me into the unfortunate truth I must admit to. When they re-released it with this cover, I thought it was better. And now, I hate this cover. Okay, I use hate a lot when I talk about things when it comes to these books, games, and etc. I don't ever actually hate most of it. You'll know if I definitely hate something. But I don't understand this re-release. It was done by Kenneth Scott, who was a senior art director for Halo during the 343 reign. I don't know why I said reign, that sounds terrible. But during the 343 era, he does a lot of work with Halo 4 concept art. You have it to where he's done art for some of the covers of Initiation and Escalation, the comic books. But this re-release, I don't get it, because it doesn't represent the book at all. Yeah, it has some of the Flood infection forms and a ginormous set of tendrils coming after the Chief, which is to represent the Flood, though there's never a Gravemind in Combat Evolved. There's the Proto Gravemind, so this many tendrils is just never seen. It's mostly like the tendrils that come off the actual Flood spores themselves. But that's not even like my main gripe. I actually don't care if they have the Flood spore or tendrils. Those are cool to me. What I don't like is Chief. First and foremost, what is this armor? It's clearly not Mark V. I think it's Mark IV and Mark VI had a baby and tried to also make that baby look like Mark V, because it just looks weird. It looks wonky. I don't want to say it's not AI. I'm saying that out loud because I did say that with the Polish version of Halo: The Fall of Reach. It's not AI. It's definitely real concept art by an artist, but it looks like something that if you said, "Hey, make Master Chief," it would make this, because it's like it's clearly Master Chief, but it's off. And that's kind of what it feels like with this armor. And the second thing is why is he holding dual SMGs? Now, one could argue, James, these games and books kind of differ with what weapons existed and what didn't. Clearly, the BR-55 rifle has existed for a long time pre-Halo 2. It's just not in Halo Combat Evolved. And you could argue with Campaign Evolved coming out this year, which will more than likely bring the battle rifle to Halo Combat Evolved story, you could really be finicky with what weapons were there and what weapons weren't. That's not my problem. My problem is this. Yes, there's no SMGs in Halo Combat Evolved. That's not the problem. The problem is there's no SMGs in this book. So why would you have it to where he's holding SMGs? It could have been an assault rifle. It could have been a shotgun again. It could have been the Magnum. It could have been literally any weapon that at least is in the book. but it's not. The only thing that I will say I like about this cover is this weird background with like the orange fog and the weird flood look to it. That kind of reminds me of the Halo 3 mission Cortana, just with the way High Cherry looks, and you have like the weird misty fog in the background. That's about it. So no real criticism towards Kenneth Scott, who designed it. But, I mean, someone had to approve this, which means it kind of feels like whoever approved it never read the book. And to whoever you are, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, sue me. It doesn't. It really doesn't. I do think that Halo should go back to this cover, or there are certain people that I know who make really good reimaginings, modern takes, but still faithful to the originals, that they could just, you know, give them some money and say, hey, let's put it on the cover. Maybe there's an image of what I'm talking about right here on the screen. I don't know. Let's move on. Okay, so with the spiel of the book details out of the way, let's actually jump into this book.
Whoa. Sir? Right. Let's thaw him out.
Okay. Bringing low-level systems online. Cracking the case in 30 seconds. He's hot! Blowing the pins in 5!
The book starts on September 19th, 2552 on the Pillar of Autumn, just as it's getting ready to exit slip space. We are introduced to our first character, a man by the name of Sam, who is awoken by his friend and tech chief Shepard. Shepard is saying like, yo, I need you to come down to the cryo chamber. Something big's about to go on and you're the only one I trust. They basically tell Sam that nothing good is about to happen coming out of slip space. Recall that for the Pillar of Autumn, just a few weeks ago, they went into slip space escaping Reach that had just fallen. We then flip over to Shipmaster Orna Fulsami, who basically sees the Pillar of Autumn exit slip space and is coming towards the Halo Ring. He then tells his troops, like, prepare to fire on the ship and board, and that's when a minor prophet known as Stewardship says, yo, relax. Do you see that beautiful ring in the background? We must take care of it. That is the one time I've ever agreed with a minor prophet. For the most part, minor prophets are annoying. Instead, he says, yo, just board the ship. And so that's what they begin to do. We then cut to the Master Chief, who is sort of in like this dream state as he begins to awaken from cryo. And this is where we get, you know, the perspective of Sam and Tom Shepard, the tech chief, who are in awe over the Master Chief. Remember, he is a Spartan, and as far as we know at this point, he is the last Spartan ever to exist. He's not. We then get to see basically the events of Halo Combat Evolved play out, where Chief wakes up, he talks with Sam and all that, and then as he's getting ready to escape, Sam gets killed by the Covenant. Shepard's like, we ought to get the heck out of here. And then he dies. So let me start off by saying this. A lot of this review is going to be me mostly talking about the extra stuff, the stuff that you don't see in Combat Evolved, because realistically, if you're wanting me to sit here and tell you about a book that tells you about a game that you've more than likely played because you've clicked on this video, you've subscribed to the channel, hopefully, I'm not going to do that. Because similar to how William Dietz felt, that just sounds like a grind. Why would I sit here and tell you the events of a book that is just the game? So now I know you're sitting here going, well, why am I watching this video? That is because there's a lot of great side stories that take place within this book. And I will still talk about the Chief here and there. I'll give you, hey, this is what the Chief was doing while this was happening. Or there'll be things that are in the book that aren't in the game that I want to discuss. So let me just put that out there right now. The first thing first is after Chief gets the Magnum, he's a little disappointed. He's like, oh man, really? This is what I have to be given? Clearly he does not know the awesomeness of the Halo Combat Evolved Magnum. Because he gets it and he's like, well, I guess it'll do. And I'm like, it will do. My brother in Christ, this is God's weapon. What are you doing? Now, one of the coolest parts about this book is we see the perspective of a lot of different elites. One of them who isn't in the novel a lot, but is kind of cool to think about his role, is known as Isna Nosoli. Probably saying that completely wrong. He is known as an Osuna, or Eye of the Prophet. Basically, these are elites that are sent into combat zones undercover to basically observe and watch. This elite in particular is following Captain Keyes. We then cut to some other characters such as Carol Raleigh, aka Echo 419, who is basically making her way to her Pelican to get off the Autumn and basically become our support throughout the game. We also then cut to Yayap. Now, if you don't remember, Yayap was actually briefly, ever so briefly mentioned in Halo Contact Harvest. Our favorite Deacon, Dadab, had basically been trying to convert a bunch of grunts to basically follow him as a deacon, and there was a grunt known as Babap, who said, hey, my cousin Yayap, and blah, 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 blah. I mentioned this actually back in my Contact of Harvest video. It's weird to talk about this book now because that felt like ages ago, and yeah, now we're here. All you need to know about with Yayap is he's scared. You know, grunts don't like to be in battle. They don't want to die. They just want to chill, relax, suck on some food nipple. But as him and his little squad of grunts are running around the Autumn, they come across an injured elite who is basically unconscious. And he hits his boys with a, yo, hear me out now, okay? He's injured. We take him back to, the ship. We get off the ship, we don't die, and, we're free basically. So let's just get him out of here. And all the other grunts are like, this guy, big thinker, y'all. We then once again switch over to some other characters, a man by the name of Major Silva and Lieutenant McKay. These are ODSTs, and we've seen some of the ODSTs with Fireteam Raven's story, and a lot of these characters do show up in Fireteam Raven, more specifically Major Silva, who we'll talk more about, don't you worry. But they're basically preparing to drop feet first into Hell, or at least feet first into Halo, with an AI known as Wellesley. He's got a weird spelling of his name, but they have their own AI that you just need to know about. We then cut to the chief basically making his way to the lifeboat, gets aboard, and they punch out. And this is actually weird because this is a part where he's having an internal conversation within his suit of armor with Cortana, and it's right here that she reveals that the Covenant call this ring Halo, which is weird because in the game it's not until you save Captain Keyes in Truth and Reconciliation where he reveals that the Covenant call the ring world Halo. And then that conversation never happens in that scene. So a lot of weird switching of when dialogue and information happens, but all you know is right here is the end of the Pillar of Autumn. As the Autumn starts to make its way down to the surface, Captain Keyes and his command crew then begin to make their way to their own lifeboat, unbeknownst that an elite is following them. But what's so cool about this scene is Keyes keeps seeing, he sees weird blurs, and he's like, what do I keep seeing? And that's when he gets in on this little life pod with his command crew, and they're all sitting there chilling, and Keyes leans over to one of his Marines and goes, hey, buddy, I'm gonna need to see that Magnum. And the guy's like, okay, sure, sir, here you go. Keyes grabs Magnum, goes, yeah, that's a good gun. Starts shooting right where the elite, who's still in active camo, is at, and kills Isna Usuli. It's just all right, Keyes, relax. We get it. You're a badass. But what's also cool is Keyes right here, looks at the gun and goes, that's a good gun. Take good care of it. And I'm like, thank you. Tell the Master Chief that, because that is a good gun. Now, as the ODSTs are making their way down to the surface, their AI basically tells them yo, there is a butte nearby that would be a butte to basically use as a headquarters. And so he designates it Alpha Base. And he's like, all right, the Covenant currently control that butte. Marines, let's take it out, or let's capture it. And this will become our new, basically, home base throughout our time here on Halo.
We're coming in too fast! Damn! Air brake failure! They blew too early! I'm losing her! Brace for impact!
Now this is kind of a funny part. When Chief makes his way down to the ring and everyone aboard his life pod dies, he starts talking about, internally of course, about how fresh and clean the air is. I don't know why I've never thought of this, but You know, like when you go to like a nature-esque area, like a reserve or the mountains, wherever you live, wherever there's just 99% nature, no buildings, well, maybe not no pollution, but you know what I mean. Like how fresh and clean the air feels. Could you imagine that air on a Halo ring? Because not only are you around more like nature, but you're also on a ring world that basically has the most advanced technology, that air has to be so crisp. And I don't know why this was just such a scene that I was like, I've never thought about that. Back with Yayap, you know, a little bit of time has passed, not a lot, but enough to where he is summoned by this elite he had saved. This elite's name turns out to be Zuka Zamami. And Zamami is grateful for what Yayap has done. He saved him. He's like, you know what? I had you transferred from your normal unit to my unit. You're now my personal, like, not advisor, but like personal assistant. And Yayap's like, great. Because again, Yayap doesn't want to do anything. He's lazy. He wants to stay out of harm's way. He just wanted to chill in his own unit because they were kind of like the non-essentials. But now here he is, basically the, you know, personal aid to an elite who is definitely going to get him killed because this elite had been injured by Master Chief. And now this elite has a personal vendetta and wants to hunt down the Master Chief. Now, there's kind of a weird time jump. So, fun fact about this book, throughout it, you have it to where every chapter kind of begins with like a deployment time. And deployment just means when they left the Autumn and made it to the surface of the ring. 1 minute, you know, we have it to where it's only been 3 minutes since the Chief made it to the surface of the ring. So 3 minutes since he exited the little pod, fought the 2 Banshees, fought the Covenant on that hill, where he would then make his way around the corner to the beacon and then would see like Johnson and the Marines, and then he would start the mission where you go and save the Marines, right? It's only been 3 minutes since all that started. But if you make it to chapter 3, which it's in here somewhere, give me a minute. Okay, so here's the funniest part. Part of the Chief's story, or at least his section of the story, ends with him killing off those grunts and elites on the hill just before the beacon tower. And he even says he hears combat in the next area over. So you're thinking, okay, cool. He's gonna bend the corner and make his way there. No, for some reason in the next chapter, it has been 3 hours and Chief just made his way over there. I get that in a novelization, you're trying to make it like more realistic, but why did the time jump so? Why? It was just a weird time jump, and now it's been 3 hours between the moment Chief landed and meets up with Johnson. But in the game, that would literally have taken you, depending on if you speed ran it or not, like 5 minutes. Not even that, like maybe 2 minutes. So a little bit of weird time jump. I'm not gonna look too much into it, but it was just kind of weird. We then switch over to Keyes and his command crew, who have been on the run from the Covenant ever since they made their way to the surface. And remember, these are people like Ensign Lovell, who are part of his command crew, who I loved in the Fall of Reach. And they've been running, because the Covenant has not let off. From the moment their pod crashed on the ring, they have been hunted by elites. In fact, they have been hunted so much that Ensign Drosky had got to the point where she was becoming like tired, mean, insubordinate, to the point where finally Keyes just goes, all right, you know what? She's basically bringing up points that like, what's the point of running? Why are we running? There's no point. We shouldn't be running. And so finally Keyes turns around and says, all right, cool. Take her weapon, tie her up. We'll leave her here because clearly you want to just give up and surrender, and we're going to keep going. And they do that. They leave this girl behind. She's of course pissed until the Covenant find her by herself and take her. On the flip side, the ODSTs, and they have a lot of people. There's a lot of ODSTs and naval personnel and Marines that have made it to the surface with them, were able to take the butte from the Covenant. So now Alpha Base has been established. On the other side of the ring though, we have it to where Chief is now getting ready to activate the little light, hard light bridge. What's weird about this part and why I'm noting it is in the book, when Chief comes across it, he talks about having this like weird familiarity with the hologram. Almost like he knows this system, how it works. Because yeah, think about it. When you play Combat Evolved, he activates a bridge on a holographic panel that doesn't probably have English. So how is it the Chief knew what to push to activate this bridge. By the end of the mission Halo, when Chief has saved the Marines and left with Echo 419, we find out that after a few more hours, Captain Keyes and his command crew were captured. And this was after that the elites had found Ensign Drosky tied up, took her with her, basically used her as like a, trying to get her to convince Keyes and his crew just to surrender. Basically, all of the command crew gets surrounded. They land and Drosky comes out, basically tied up, saying, "Told you, Captain Keyes, we shouldn't have ran, ha 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 ha." And so then the elites ask Drosky which one is the captain. She points out Keyes. The elites then kill everyone in the command crew, including Drosky. And the saddest part is, they kill Ensign Lovell. Why, God, why? Well, while Keyes gets captured and Ensign Lovell is in the stars, Chief is back at Alpha Base. Well, not back at Alpha Base, he'd never been there, but he's at Alpha Base, and this is kind of a very weird part. Chief is like tending to his armor, and that doesn't sound weird until you realize that he's tending to his armor he's not wearing. Like, he's in just like normal clothes working on the Mark V. And he gets told that Major Silva, the main ODST, wants to see him. So he gets to go put his armor back on, but then this corporal's like, sorry, Chief, Major Silva actually wants you not in your armor. So Chief goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, fine, that's fine." So he makes his way to Major Silva's little, base, so to speak. And he salutes Major Silva because he's a major, and right as of right now, Major Silva is in command. With Keyes missing, Silva is second in charge. And right here, Major Silva rails into the Chief. First and foremost, it's it's a show of power and a little bit of disrespect in the military when you salute an officer and they don't say at ease. Like, if they keep you in that salute position too long, you're either getting your ass chewed out or you did something. So both, basically. And right here, Lovell basically starts saying, like, even though he knows what the Chief has done, like as a Spartan and as a soldier, and he commends that, he fundamentally believes that the Spartans are freaks. They're all dead. Chief is the last one, and he'll soon be dead too. And the only way this war is going to be won are by regular humans. And so, again, this comes to the point where I've seen a lot of people mad how, what's his face, Del Rio treats the Chief in Halo 4, but, what Del Rio did was just, being a baby. He's just whining. This dude literally just sat there and said, all of your family is dead because they're garbage. Okay, I'm so sorry, sir. Let's see, how many ODSTs have died compared to Spartans? Okay, there was 75 of us. How many there's a reason I'm not in the military. But anyways, after Silva says all that, he then finally puts the Chief at ease and says, we've discovered where Captain Keyes is. We're gonna go save him. I do value your input, so let's start talking. Aboard our favorite ship, the Truth and Reconciliation, Zamami comes to the Masters of Council, or the Councils of Masters. Either way, he comes to this room full of people who are basically the in charge of everything going on. Now, without giving away too much, fine. In Halo 2, we find out that the fleet master of this fleet of particular justice is, in fact, Vel Vadamine, aka the Arbiter. The Arbiter is nowhere near in this book, at least in the original version. He does make his way into the extra bonus content at the very end of the book, which we'll talk about, but right here, he's not present. But who is present is the Prophet of Minor Stewardship. And right here, Zamami's trying to propose that, hey, we should hunt down this special human because he's dangerous. Thank you. And everyone in the room's or more specifically, the Minor Prophet's no, that's kind of a waste of resources. We're not going to be doing all that. And so his plan is fundamentally rejected.
The enemy has captured Captain Keyes and are holding him aboard one of their cruisers, the Truth and Reconciliation. The ship is currently holding position approximately 300 meters above the other end of this plateau.
So how do we get inside the ship if it's in the air? The Corps issued me a rifle, not wings.
There's a gravity lift that ferries troops and supplies between the ship and the surface. That's our ticket in.
Once we get
So as the mission Truth and Reconciliation begins, Master Chief makes his way to the ship, and Silva is sending a team to the Pillar of Autumn to basically secure supplies, weapons, armaments, vehicles, all that kind of stuff to be brought back to Alpha Base. And I'm not gonna lie, 90% of this chapter was just the events of Truth and Reconciliation. So there's not really much to talk about other than that Chief saved Captain Keyes. What follows after the Truth and Reconciliation is everyone's going over the damage and the Carnage report. And after this happens, Zombie is then again summoned by his superiors, where he is finally given approval to hunt down the Master Chief, because clearly, you were right, that dude needs to go. While Lieutenant McKay, basically like the second in command of Major Silva, and her Marines, by the way, I don't really mention McKay that much, I love her. She's the best character in this book, in my opinion. Plus, there's some stuff that happens with the Chief later where she's just, a W character. I'll tell you what that is later, hopefully. While her and her team lead an attack on the Pillar of Autumn to get all these weapons and all that supplies, Keyes is back at Alpha Base and conversing with Major Silva, who is, funny enough, very similar to Sergeant Faison in the Cole Protocol, who was annoyed with Keyes for pulling rank. Because again, ODSTs and what Captain Keyes is are two different branches. You have the Marines and you have the Navy. So even though there's still different branches, the chain of command still follows. So in this situation, Captain Keyes is higher rank than Major Silva. So Major Silva's a bit annoyed to give up command again, especially just to a Navy officer, but what are you gonna do? Anyways, they're kind of going over like their plans and all this kind of stuff. And right here, Keyes says, they've discovered there's something about a control room that they need to find it. So he's sending Chief and Cortana to go find it, which is where we would get into the beginning of Silent Cartographer. But while this is happening, Silva brings it to Keyes' attention, basically his hatred for the Spartans. And Keyes right here doesn't want to be, get on Silva's bad side, because one, he's a good soldier. But he also needs to tell him, straight up, I get your concerns. I get your reluctance for the Spartans, and specifically the Chief. But to be honest, if I had 1,000 Spartans, I would deploy them first. We need them. They are the best of the best. And even Keyes right here says that Chief is a remarkable soldier for who he is, not what he is. He would have been a great soldier had he been normal. But it's also right here where Silva's let's be real here. What's only special about him is the fact that he is a Spartan. He's a freak. And in fact, those freaks are responsible for the death of a few of ODSTs that I knew. Back in the day, they sent these ODSTs into the gym, and that led to a fight between a young Spartan, and 4 ODSTs that led to some of their deaths. AKA the scene in Halo: The Fall of Reach when Chief, as a young 14-year-old, newly augmented Spartan, absolutely pulverizes these ODSTs. And that's what led him to hate the Spartans and call them freaks. And it's right here where Keyes again goes, I understand your concerns, I see them, but my decision stands. We need the Chief. Anyways, we're sending him out there to find these artifacts. And what's a little bit peculiar about the scene too is right here, Keyes presumes that the foreigners left behind other artifacts on other worlds and are presumably the ones responsible for making Halo. And this is kind of where it's okay, maybe that the higher branches knew a little bit about foreigners being having artifacts in other worlds. The reason I bring this up is because again, in The Fall of Reach, you never hear the word foreigner. And everyone seems to be curious, what are these weird artifacts? Who could they be tied to? Whereas in Meridian Divide and Battleborn, the word foreigner is thrown around willy-nilly. It's just kind of still one of those weird things. Back at the Pillar of Autumn, McKay and her troops were very easily able to secure parts of the ship that they needed to, take. They were able to find pelicans, weapons, supplies. The only thing they weren't able to find was ammo, realistically, for the pelicans. So like their heavy guns and their rocket pods wouldn't have any sort of refueling at all. So basically it just means that there's very little air support besides like the occasional dropping off of troops.
The Covenant believe that what they call the silent Cartographer is somewhere under this island. The Cartographer is a map room that will lead us to Halo's control center. The island has multiple structures and installations. One of them contains the map room.
We're approaching the LZ. It's gonna be hot. Get set to cut out swinging. Touchdown! Hit it, Marines!
On the mission to the Silent Cartographer, the events of it played out mostly the same. However, there's one slight change. When you're going into that security building where you fight the 2 hunters and you make your way down and deactivate the security to unlock the door to the Silent Cartographer, that room is actually a trap room for the chief set by Zamami and Yayap. Those hunters were there on purpose. And it's just kind of cool because it technically means when you're in that room fighting the hunters, Zamami and Yayap are also there. You just don't see them because at one point they realize that the chief is going to mollywop everyone in the room and then they hide. In the next chapter, we see McKay and her platoon basically now making their way back to the Pillar of Autumn. A lot of them are driving warthogs, a lot of them have pelicans that are securing, main battle tanks and all that kind of stuff. But on their way there, it's no easy trip as they are quickly ambushed by the Covenant. And this is where we get the perspective of 2 elites, a blue elite named Ado Mortemi, as well as a gold elite known as Field Master Noga Putumi. And it's kind of a cool scene because you get to see like just the inner politics of the elites and the Covenant. But while this is happening, you have it to where you see the perspective of a young Marine known as Lance Corporal Jones. And Lance Corporal Jones gets basically stranded after his hog is destroyed. And he finds a nice little spot to, basically scope and snipe that blue elite and then try and go for the gold elite. And while this is all happening, that blue elite goes to hide, but is, still murdered. And it's just so interesting because one very weird thing about the elites in this book is a lot of them are kind of cowardly and do a lot of things that are super, like what you would consider dishonorable. Like Zamami being injured and being saved by grunts. In this book, it's fine. It was a minor soldier saving an officer. Cool. But then in like the Cole Protocol, one elite breaks his leg and he's like, you gotta kill me. My life is over. I can no longer show my face back at Sanghelios or near any other Sangheli. Being injured is like almost the same as being dishonored. So the fact that this, Zamami was injured, saved by a grunt, you would think like would be just game over for him too, but it never comes up. Same thing with this blue elite, Ado Mortemi. He hides when things get dicey around him. An elite hiding? Nah, dude, like that would be, even Zuka Zamami hid from the chief again. So like, it's like, clearly the honor system had not been fully developed for this book yet. Back at the Silent Cartographer, when you're about to go into the Silent Cartographer and you fight 2 hunters, it's so cool because you get the actual perspective of hunters. You get the first one, which is named Igiru Nosahuru, and his bond brother, Ogata Nosafasu. And these hunters were just preparing to kill the chief. And what's interesting about this is the anatomy of the hunters is weird in this book. And so is kind of like the way that they're described. It's very clear that like the worm system of the hunters had not been fully developed yet because it makes it sound like that they are themselves just normal individual aliens that aren't like a massive colony of worms. Like it's very clear in this book that that had not been developed yet. Later on, after Chief fights his way down to the Silent Cartographer, he's able to remove pieces of his armor to administer first aid. Again, it's weird because I didn't even actually talk about it, but with Chief having his armor off early on with Major Silva like situation, it's weird because being able to take that armor off is supposed to be difficult, and it's supposed to have like an entire tech crew that are supposed to basically help them take this armor off. Yet here you have Chief multiple times taking armor off, pieces of armor off that aren't his helmet very easily. And so I think, again, it's just like that showing of we have not fully developed this system of the story yet. Likewise, just before the end of the Silent Cartographer, Chief once again is having this weird, strange, like familiarity with Forerunner systems. And in fact, you start to see that he kind of has an affinity for it. Like, he knows how they work, even if he doesn't fully understand them. And it's kind of driving home something I don't want to say because I'm going to get yelled at. By the end of the Silent Cartographer, Keyes and his crew have made their way to Alpha Installation, also known as the Swamp, to find a cache of Covenant weapons. And it's kind of here where you get, like, instead of it to where Chief finds the dead soldier and the helmet and watches the recording of the Flood attacking Keyes and his team, you actually just read it as it's happening. You're not watching a recording. So it's fine. It's pretty much the exact same like stuff that happens, except for you do get to see Keyes' perspective of being attacked by a Flood spore, having it to where the spore latches itself onto Keyes and sends a stabbing tendril into him and going into his spine, and like watching Keyes essentially like lose conscious of everything and control of his body. And this is what he says. As it's basically burrowing its way into his body, he starts to lose control, and he tried to yell for help, but couldn't make a sound. His heart raced as his extremities grew numb. One by one, his lungs felt heavy. And all he could feel at the end of this is the Flood's hunger, this endless hunger. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you guys. This part's rough. Our sweet, sweet boy Jenkins also gets attacked. And right here, after watching Keyes basically be consumed by the Flood, he himself, Jenkins, was also taken by the Flood. And he tried to do what he could to scream for help and basically take control of his body. But he just felt the same thing Keyes felt, the endless hunger. Back aboard the Truth and Reconciliation, Zamami has been called back to the same room where he met with the Councils of Masters. But instead of finding the Councils of Masters, he finds that shipmaster, Soha Rolami's decapitated head. And this is where the Prophet of Stewardship walks in and says, yo, yeah, he basically failed to prevent the release of something on this ring. This is what happens when you fail me. So, tell me, what's your plan to go for this human? Because clearly you've already failed. You should be where he is. But I'll give you one more chance. Tell me how you're going to capture this human. If I like the answer, you're free to go. If not, you join him. And it's like, oh, okay, relax. Zamami gives his spiel, and he's given the approval.
This is as far as I can go.
Roger that. We'll be able to find our way to the control center from here.
Good luck. Full hammer out.
This is where the mission Assault on Control Room begins. One thing to note here, though, is in the beginning of the mission, in the game at least, you hear Johnson's voice when the Pelican comes crashing down when you first walk out onto the bridge, and you hear, "This is Fire Team Zulu, we are requesting anybody help." And that's clearly Johnson's voice.
This is Fire Team Zulu requesting immediate assistance from any UNSC forces. Does anyone copy? Over.
I didn't think there were any human.
But based off this book's events, and of course what we know, during that time, Johnson's already in the swamp with Keyes getting attacked by the Flood. So clearly he can't be here. And I looked at Halopedia, and they pointed out the same thing and said, more than likely, it's a random Marine, but the voice actor for Johnson was just used because, again, Johnson was more than likely a throwaway character at the time. Back at Alpha Base, McKay's doing some light reconnaissance work. They're just doing their shifts of checking the perimeter, and they come across a grunt, unconscious, next to a crashed ghost. They decide to take him prisoner, take him back to Alpha Base. What we learn is that this grunt is Yayap, and he was planted here on purpose as a means for Zamami to get a man on the inside, because he knows that the Master Chief stays at this base, but he doesn't know when he's there. So what he's going to do is have Yayap go in, and when he sees that the Chief is in fact at this base, Yap will hit a signal, and that will tell Zamami the chief is here, send in the cavalry. And that basically ends Assault on Control Room.
Transmission from the captain's dropship was from this area. That was over 12 hours ago.
Which then brings us to 343 Guilty Spark, and this is where we get more of a perspective of Captain Keyes, who's in like this dreamy fog-like state. He doesn't really know where he's at, he doesn't know what's going on, but he can see memories of his life literally flashing before his eyes. And what's happening is every time these memories come across and they disappear, they're gone. He can't remember it. But he knows that there's something in his head looking for something. And they're basically just swiping through memories like it's an Instagram reel or Tinder or whatever you use to swipe. And basically we also get like our first little talk about Charybdis 9 and Keyes' first time killing someone. This is like the events, not a lot like, this is the events of Cole Protocol when Keyes goes to Charybdis 9 during the big mob and the insurrectionists and the death of Major Watanabe and all that kind of stuff. It's a cool little bit of, hey, the Cole Protocol's here. So in this next part, we see Chief talk to that crazed Marine inside the research facility. That Marine who's like panicking and trying to shoot at you. And Chief kind of has the same reaction we do. Not the killing part, because he doesn't do that. I mean, I don't kill him either. But what I will say is Chief tries to reason with this person, but this dude's just, he's lost. He's a lost cause. He's traumatized. And so Chief's like, yo, exit's that way. I'm going to go find Keyes. And the dude's just like, ah. But what's weird about this is Chief feels like something's going on, and it's eerie. And this is where he kind of gets genuine fear. He actually wishes Cortana was with him because he's like, I'm kind of alone and I'm a bit scared. Back at Alpha Base, while Chief is still in the facility, a unaccounted for Pelican known as Charlie 217 requests the ability to land. And a lot of the people there are like, where did you come from? And he's like, oh, I came out of the Pillar of Autumn during the crash. My ship was injured or damaged, so I couldn't contact you. Just got those repairs made. Please let me join you. And they verify his service number and like, yeah, sure, okay, go ahead. But the AI Wesley is basically like, Wellesley, I don't really know. And he's like, it's fine to let them land, but let's be on guard. And we learn that on the ship, Zamami and a group of elite commandos have somehow found this human and this Pelican, have basically said like, you know, tell them we need to land or we'll kill you. Well, after he gets clearance to land, they kill him anyways. And then they land at the base and start attacking. Or at least the commandos make their way out, because as they're coming in, Wesley's like, there's something aboard this ship. I can see like the body signatures. So the ship starts getting attacked just the moment it lands, but a few of the commandos are in active camo, including Zamami, and are able to make it out. And throughout the base, they are searching for the chief, killing anyone they can. And while they're doing that, another group of Covenant then start their attack on Alpha Base. This is like a two-way type of attack. One, Zamami and his crew get in undercover, kill the chief, while the actual Covenant forces come in and take Alpha Base. They're hoping to kill two birds with one stone. Unfortunately, even though Yap says he saw the chief earlier and that's why he triggered the whole thing earlier, I don't really know when he would have seen the chief, because Chief hasn't been there since before Silent Cartographer, and that was well before Major Silva would have ever been able to go on patrol. I don't know, it's kind of a weird part, but Yap says he saw the chief, but that was hours earlier. They land, they attack, Zamami finds Yap. Yap's like, yo, he's this way, he was guarding some banshees. So at this point you realize Yap's just lying out of his teeth, he just doesn't want to be here anymore. And actually, as they make their way to these banshees, the Covenant has been overrun and they start to retreat. And Zamami's like, where is the Spartan? And Yap goes, I don't know, big dog, we got to get out of here. And, you know, the elite's like, I should just kill you now for lying. And Yap pulls out his plasma pistol and goes, you could, but like right now you're kind of screwed. Like you're gonna need me. And the elite kind of goes, yeah, you're probably right. And so together they get in a Banshee and escape. I don't know how that works in terms of how they both fit, but I think it's kind of adorable to think about. While this is all happening, we get another little perspective of Keyes, who is still fighting this proto Gravemind, this voice. They call it the Other in this book, as it's prying through his memories, and he's trying to say his service number and name to kind of like maintain his autonomy and his own like sense of like understanding, like something in him is searching for something, and by focusing in on his name and service number, he's able to slow that thing down. One thing that's interesting is in here you don't get the mention of Miranda Keyes. Of course, this is still at the very least 2 years in terms of writing before Halo 2, but it's a little interesting that Miranda isn't mentioned, because she is mentioned in these scenes in the Combat Evolved Anniversary terminals. Later on, as Chief has fought his way through the entire facility and made his way outside of the base to basically be picked up by Echo 419, he meets up with our sweet little light bulb 343 Guilty Spark. And Guilty Spark right here is all like, talking to him. He's like, yo, they released the Flood. And again, interesting part about this book is there's extra dialogue you don't hear about in the game that just suddenly exists. But Chief asks, Guilty Spark, like, did you say that they're called the Flood? And Guilty Spark's like, yeah, dude. Why are you asking stupid questions? Come on, let's go. And that ends the mission 343 Guilty Spark. So after the attack on Alpha Base, the troops are basically working to restore the entire base, as much as possible. Silva informs McKay that the elites that were here were after the Chief, because it's clearly they were looking for someone inside the facility. And right here, Silva's like, or McKay's like, well, where is the Chief? And Silva's like, I don't know. He disappeared with Cortana, and they're off playing games. And McKay doesn't say it out loud, but she understands the frustration that Silva has with the Spartans, but she doesn't agree with his whole philosophy of the Spartans. She actually, likes the Chief. And, she doesn't ever say anything about the Spartans, but overall, she has a better analysis of the Chief than Silva does, and that's what makes me like her a lot more than Silva, plus one other thing.
We must collect the index before we can activate the installation.
So then this starts the mission, the library. And this part's actually kind of funny, because the moment the Chief, in the game, this mission starts with Chief running out because he doesn't understand that he just teleported. And then that's it. That's the cutscene. Then you just go off and play the mission. But in the book, Chief is pissed. And he turns and shoots at Guilty Spark with his assault rifle. And Guilty Spark just goes, okay, let's go. And it's like, I feel like you've gotten mad at me for less, but all right. And it's funny right here that like Chief is talking to Spark, and Spark's like, yo, you should know a lot of this. Like, why are you being weird? And Chief's like, of course I know all this. Just refresh me. When were you put in charge of this ring? And Spark's like, 100,000 years. If you want the actual number, it's 100,217. And while Master Chief's finding his way through the library, also kind of annoyed by this place, like it's kind of funny. Maybe William Dietz was playing this and said, this mission is awful, and just wrote that in the book, because you can tell Chief is just annoyed with the endlessness of this facility, which is weird because I love the library. Not the mission, the actual building, which is why it's my logo. Anyways, there's a little bit of a subsection in this part of the book where it talks about how the Flood has laid dormant for the past 100,000 years, being studied, not being able to eat anything, but it's still alive. It's still being, kept alive. I don't know if it's because they're being suspended, but the way it just talks about right here is that they just didn't have anything to eat, so they went into like a dormant state. Either way, ever since the ring was basically, or at least their little research facility was broken open into, they've been able to eat. And now they're traveling through the inner tunnels of the ring. And one of those tunnels is directly beneath Alpha Base. Now, another fun little cool part is while Chief is making his way around, fighting off the Flood, he finds a room kind of where it's like peaceful for a moment. Like he has a moment to take his helmet off administer any first aid, eat like supplement bars. It's kind of a funny little section, but he comes across a dead Marine and reads the dog tags as Sergeant Marvin Mabuto. Now, this is intriguing because this is the main character of Halo Parasite's Wake, the book coming out this year. And what I find about what's so funny about this part is I remember when the book was revealed, a lot of people were freaking out about Marvin Mabuto. Someone who has not read The Flood in so long, I was like, I don't remember who that is. So it's a little funny for me to read it. I'm like, he's literally in here for a page. We were freaking out over this. But it is cool to find out that the reason Mabuto is even here in the library is because, like the chief, Mabuto was found by Guilty Spark. And Guilty Spark was going to use Mabuto to get through the library and get the activation index. Unfortunately for Mabuto, he's not a Spartan. And the Flood, at least I think it's the Flood, very brutally murdered Mabuto. Like, even Chief says it right here that like it would be impossible to make Mabuto into a Flood form because there's just nothing left. And I'm like, what happened to him? And I don't even think it's going to be the Flood. I think it's going to be something else. I don't know. I guess we'll see in Parasite's Wake. On the flip side, Alpha Base is now going to go on the offensive. So what they're going to do is set up a trap similar to how they were trapped by Yap. So they take a Pelican that was, shot, the Charlie 217 that they destroyed with the elites. They took pieces of it, brought it to an area, placed Marines there, and acted like they were asking for help to draw the Covenant in. And this would just basically allow them to fight off the Covenant. But while this is happening, while the Covenant finally arrives and starts attacking the UNSC, we get the perspective of our sweet boy Jenkins, who's a little bit more than just Jenkins. He's now a Flood form. And what's interesting is he's a Flood form that's also still kind of in the transitionary period of becoming a full combat form, because Jenkins still has, at the very least, some, autonomy, some consciousness. He doesn't have full control over his body, but he has moments where he can make facial features, or he can, change his face, or he can move the body. Either way, what you need to know is that he is here, he is cognizant of what's happening, but there's something else in control of him. He's calling that the other. We just know that this is the Flood, or the Gravemind, whatever you want to call it. And so while McKay and the Covenant are fighting each other, this group of Flood come out from underneath the ground, from these tunnels that were talked about earlier, and start attacking everyone. And so now you have this big scale battle where it's the UNSC fighting the Covenant and the Flood. And Jenkins here knows something's wrong with him. Like, he understands what he is, and not fully understands, but he understands he's not him, and he wants to die. So at the next opportunity he can take, he's going to try and die. And so when he's basically being a Flood form, he sees McKay, and he goes to attack her, basically praying that she's a good shot and will just kill him. Unfortunately for him, McKay kind of sidesteps him, knocks him down, and her and a few of the Marines are able to detain him and say, let's bring him back to Alpha Base to figure out what this is. And it's kind of for Jenkins, please kill me. So by this point, Chief has found the activation index and has left the library, ending that mission. We then get a little bit of perspective again from Keyes, who realizes that the Flood are trying to find a way off the ring. And so that's what they're perusing his mind for. Anything they can that will help them get off the ring. And at the same time, they're looking for Earth. This is why it's sifting through his memories. And so Keyes starts remembering pointless things that the Flood clearly don't need, but he knows that it will cause the Flood to have to look at it and would prevent them again from finding Earth.
Which means that any organism with sufficient mass and cognitive capability is a potential vector. Is something wrong?
No, nothing.
Splendid, shall we?
So at the beginning of the mission to Betrayals, the normal stuff happens. Chief tries to activate Halo, Cortana stops it. Then they start making their way to go and deactivate all of the generators in the canyon. What's cool about this part is Chief's a little bit worried about Cortana's mental state because of, one, the way she just reacted when, you know, she saw that Chief was trying to activate the ring. She was very aggressive. And at the same time, he's like, did being in Halo kind of do something to her? It's not really explored, but it's like the seed is set right here. Back at Alpha Base, they have studied these flood forms. And it's a little weird here because McKay's basically debriefing Silva on what she's learned. And oddly, it's like a lot of really good information, like the anatomy of the flood, how they work. The Forerunners probably built this ring to kill/contain the flood. And it's kind of like, where did you get all this information from? Like, I don't know, it could be the AI, but still it felt a little bit like, we just need an info dump right here. It didn't really make sense to me. Either way, at this point, Yayap and Zamami have made their way close to the Pillar of Autumn. And Yayap's like, okay, here's the plan. We're gonna go here. You're going to pretend to be one of those commandos that died back at Alpha Base, because clearly, and more likely, the Prophet of Stewardship is gunning for your head for failing once again to kill the Chief. Zamami's kind of like, okay, yeah, let's do that. And he says one weird thing. He says, what about if they like run my DNA? Like, I'm a little worried that once they run my DNA, they'll clearly find out I am Zamami. And Yayap's like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, I'm sure that whoever's in charge of the security detail of the Pillar of Autumn would just be happy to have a commando here, and more than likely won't ask questions. What's weird about this part is I get that in the games and in the media, the elites all look alike, but this was really just a y'all look alike, because he could just, he doesn't change armor. He doesn't do anything different. He just says, oh, this is my new name, which is the name of another elite. He did say he was worried that someone would recognize him, or someone who knew that elite that he's impersonating would find out. But it still just felt a little bit weird that like this was their plan, just to walk in there and say I'm one other person that I'm not, and no one would ask questions. Like it just felt a little goofy in my opinion. Back at Alpha Base, Jenkins is in like a cell, or Flood Jenkins is in a cell. And apparently he used pantomime to request a mirror. And so when they showed the mirror of what he was, he tried to scream, couldn't do anything. He then tried to commit suicide twice. Couldn't do anything. And McKay kind of like walks in and tries to give like him water, but the moment she got close, the other, or the flood form, tried to attack her. And so then Silva comes in and also tries to communicate with Jenkins. And for a brief moment, it looks like he's gonna do something until the flood form tries to rip its own arm off and use the bone to stab Silva. When this fails, the flood form basically just gives up. And for that brief moment of freedom, after Silva asks where the flood are coming from, Jenkins is able to point down to Silva's feet, and McKay picks up the message. They're coming from below us. And Silva's like, okay, find the hole and plug it. And like the roughest part for Jenkins is he can feel that arm being ripped off. He everything that happens to the body, he still feels it. So imagine you ripping your own arm off and just having to experience that. Like he almost went unconscious from the pain, but was able to stay alive. Now, here's one thing I'm going to say real quick. This basically was the end of 2 Betrayals. Chief made his way through the canyons, deactivated all the pulse generators, and now is going to find Captain Keyes and his CNI transponder. I don't know if it's because the 2 Betrayals is quite frankly my least favorite mission in Combat Evolved, or if it's just the fact that this was the one chapter that really felt like this is what the book would have been had Dietz not asked to add extra stories. But by God, was it a grueling chapter. And I think it's my own biases for hating that mission, but it was an almost shot for shot retelling of the entire mission. And I just felt like, so for the first time in a while, I felt really just not wanting to read a Halo book. I was like, this is terrible. Like, I know this mission like the back of my hand. I don't want to read this, but I kept reading it because there might have been extra bits. Not really, just extra dialogue and extra, this is how Chief felt in the moment, but like, God, that was a rough chapter, I'm not gonna lie.
The Covenant network is absolute chaos. From what I've been able to piece together, their leadership ordered all ships to abandon Halo when they found the flood, but they were too late. The flood overwhelmed this cruiser and disabled it. The Covenant are terrified the Flood will repair the ship and use it to escape from Halo. They've sent in a strike team to neutralize the Flood and repair the ship for immediate departure. I've got a good lock on Captain Key's CNI transponder signal. He's alive, and the implants are intact. There's some interference from the cruiser's damaged reactor. I'll bring us in as close as I can. Oh, I see. The coordinate data needs to be... Right. Sorry.
Then start the next mission, Keys, where Chief and Cortana have to go back to the Truth and Reconciliation to help, or not really help, but save the Captain Keys to get his transponder and blow up the Autumn. We learn that the Covenant have feared that the Flood are going to use this ship to escape, so they've begun to sterilize the ship as much as possible. And the ship has been repaired, kind of. It's able to be space-worthy soon, besides the fact that it's leaking coolant. But back at Alpha Base, McKay and her team are able to find the hole that the Flood were coming out of, and they were actually able to very easily plug it. And this gives them another day or two to basically come up with their new plan, which is capture the Truth and Reconciliation and use it to escape while also bringing with them Flood Jenkins as a specimen they can study. That's great. Aboard the Pillar of Autumn, though, Yayap and Zamami have been able to easily sneak aboard, say that, well, Yayap's fine to say who he is, but Zamami's going under a different name. They're basically just put in charge of their own little unit, and part of this unit is to basically watch cargo be brought in, make sure it is what it says it is. And in fact, some of these cargo containers had flood spores in it. And what's funny in this part is Yayap's in charge of like a group of jackals. And again, jackals and grunts hate each other. But like Yayap's like, yo, we should check each container and make sure that the contents are what they say they are. And the jackals are like, you're not in charge. And Yayap's like, I am in charge. So they did it. And it turns out that one of these containers had flood spores in it. And by checking it, they were able to kill off these flood spores and prevent the Flood, at least for now, from taking over the ship. And right here, the jackals are like, hey, thank God Big Dog over here is like overseeing this because he saved us. And right here, Yayap annoyingly becomes an honorary jackal. So while Chief is fighting his way through the Truth and Reconciliation once again, Keys is just doing what he can to both fight off the Flood and at the same time try and tell Chief to leave. And it's also right here that we finally see that Keys' like memories are like dwindling down to the point that he's officially consumed by the Flood. Chief walks into the room, finds the proto Gravemind, which makes it sound more alive than it looks in the game. Like he makes it sound like it's standing there and it's looking at stuff. And I don't know, just the way he describes it was very different than what you see. Because when you see it in the game, it looks like just a giant mass just chilling. But I like the way he described it. It made it feel more eerie. And then he crushes Keys' skull and takes the CNI transponder. Sorry, Miranda. That finishes the mission Keys and begins the mission The Maw.
It'll hold.
We're not gonna make it.
We'll make it.
Pull up! Pull up! You did that on purpose, didn't you?
Weirdly enough, this mission starts with the same thing of Chief crashing the Pelican, but it omits the panic. Like there's no Cortana saying this thing's falling apart. we're not going to make it, and you did that on purpose. Like, that just doesn't happen, which is a little sad because I like that part. While Chief and Cortana are making their way through the Pillar of Autumn, Silva and McKay and 276 Leatherneck Marines, 76 Navy personnel, and a few others are making their way to the Truth and Reconciliation. One group is attacking by air with captured Banshees, while Silva and his small team are being brought in through a Pelican into the shuttle bay, and while McKay and her team are fighting on the ground to the grav lift to try and just basically come at the ship from all fronts and try to take it as quickly as possible. A little bit before this though, while Silva was preparing for this mission, we learned that Wesley, the AI, has been in like contact with Cortana. They've been working together, piecing information together, and it's right here where, like, you know, the AI has learned about the Flood and their danger. And so he asks Silva, like, do you think it's really a good idea for us to commandeer a flood-infested Covenant ship and take it back to Earth? And Silva's like, don't worry, because like once we're in like slip space, I'm gonna have teams go through and purge the ship and capture a few specimens, just so that way we have something to bring back to Earth so that it can be studied. And the AI is like, I have to tell you, like, that this is a terrible idea. Like, this is not something we want anywhere near Earth. Like, this is dangerous and you should probably change your plan. But Silva's like, well, sorry, buddy, I'm in charge. You're an AI. Stay in your lane. And there's not much that Wesley can do. Held up in the shuttle bay of the Pillar of Autumn, there's like a bunch of elites and grunts just sitting there yapping. This includes Zamami, and one of the elites mentions that a weird armored human has made their way aboard the Pillar of Autumn. Zamami, knowing exactly who this is, then volunteers to go out and kill it. He pulls Yayap to the side and says, yo, I have a very easy mission for you. I need you to monitor the Spartan, tell me where he's going, so that way I can, you know, intervene when I can and kill him. That's all you gotta do. Just let me know where he's going. And Yayap says, yeah, I can do that. And Zami's like, you're a good man. So this is a very interesting part because obviously it doesn't happen in the game, but it does add to more of like the danger of the Flood when it comes to the Master Chief. There's a point where a combat Flood form attacks the Chief, breaks his shields, allowing for a Flood infection form to latch on, break through like the weaker parts of the Mjolnir armor, and actually send a tentacle in and dig its way to the Chief's spine. And so for a brief moment, the Master Chief is like, this is it. I have failed. I'm going to become one of these things. But just as that happens, Cortana uses what power she has with the Mjolnir armor and basically tells the shield system to send out an electrical discharge, which then of course shocks the Flood spore and kills it. Chief then takes a moment to basically administer first aid, seal up the hole, and keep moving. So it's weird to think that for just the briefest moment, Chief could have become part of the Flood, part of the crew, part of the ship. Back on the Truth and Reconciliation, the teams have very easily taken control of this ship. Like, the Covenant were not expecting it. So for the most part, the entire UNSC has commandeered this ship. They have captured the Prophet of Stewardship. And they still have Jenkins, who is currently chained between two Marines. I don't know how that works. And so right here, right now, you have it to where Silva has captured a Covenant cruiser, a Prophet, and a brand new parasitic life form. Yeah, in reality, this would be like the best moment for Oni. Oni would have fallen in love with Silva. Brother would have been given medals for days because he brought home the holy grail of anything you could capture. And he knows it. Silva's adamant about getting out here. And he's using this like idea of the glory they will get for this capture as a means to keep like telling his Marines, keep fighting. We're almost there. This is great for us. We're all going to be getting promotions and medals and everything you could ask for. And so it's working. His team's like, this is great. Like, this is the exact type of like energy we need after the fall of Reach. But it's here that like, you know, McKay's noticing that there's a lot of Flood on this ship. And seeing kind of like what's happened to Jenkins, she knows that like this cannot be a good idea. And when she's talking to one of these like officers from the Navy side of things, the officer's like, you see this like tube? And she's like, yeah. She's like, this is an fiber optic pathway that connects the control room to the ship's engines. Should this be destroyed, the whole ship will blow up. We got to protect it. And McKay's like, yeah, that makes sense. I'll do that. But again, while McKay's sitting here thinking about it, she then looks to Jenkins. And again, Jenkins can his face is still pretty much formed in him. So he is able to look at her and kind of just be in pain. And looking at her, she realizes what needs to be done. She even tries to bring it up to Silva, saying sir, I think before we leave, we should land the ship and try and purge as much of the flood as possible. Silva once again goes, can't do that because Chief's gonna blow up the Autumn. I don't want to be anywhere near this place when it blows. And I kind of need some specimens. We need something to bring back to Earth. And Wellesley again chimes in going, McKay is right, sir. We cannot do this. And Silva yells at them both. He's like, I'm in charge. Do your duty. And this is a phenomenal part from McKay because she's sitting there staring at Jenkins and she realizes that she is going to do her duty, but her duty is not to Silva. Her duty is not to the people aboard this ship. Her fundamental duty as a soldier is to Earth. And if they bring this ship to Earth and things go wrong, it's the end. There's no coming back. So McKay walks over to that fiber optic path, primes a grenade. And in the moments before it goes off, she looks to Jenkins, who finally is able to mouth the word thank you to her. And the grenade explodes, causing a chain reaction. The entire ship detonates. And just before that happens, Silva's panicking because, the explosion's starting to come. And Wellesley, the AI, is like, hey, you know what? You should be proud of her. She's a hell of a Marine. And that's it. McKay, Jenkins, Silva, all the Marines aboard this ship, the prophet of stewardship, gone. Dead. So then that just leaves the Master Chief, Yayap, and Zamami. As Chief is working his way through the engine room and blowing the fusion reactors, Yayap discovers that if Zamami goes to this certain lift that leads up to the tunnels that we drive through at the end of the game, he could basically come in contact with the Chief just like he wants. And Zamami's like, good work, I'll head there right now. Good job, Yayap. And Yayap's like, thanks. And so Yayap closes off the communication. And the beautiful part about this is Yayap kind of has a bit of, some sense of connection to Zamami. He's like, you know what? All in all, that dude sucks. But I've enjoyed his company. Then Yayap also recognizing that it probably doesn't matter. Something tells him that they're all going to die. Yayap gets up, grabs a few food rations, some breathers, takes a ghost, and just hits the road. And he just leaves. And for the first time in a while, Yayap is happy. He's peaceful. As Chief finished destroying the fusion reactors, he's waiting for his lift to come. And what's cool is that this is a lift we see in the game, and I'll show a scene right here. But as this lift comes up, it's a few grunts and a shade turret with Zamami in the controls that just starts shooting at the Chief. Chief takes cover. Cortan's like, don't worry, I got this. And she deactivates the lift, causing it to go down, fall. And Zamami, before that fall happens, thinks this is it. This is the day he will kill the Chief, regain his honor, and after this, he's gonna deal with the annoying Yayap. You just have this moment where Yayap, actually felt some connection to Zamami. Of course he left, he abandoned his post, but what else are you gonna do? But then you have it on the flip side where Zamami's like, that grunt sucked, dude. He's cooked after this. But it doesn't matter. Because that lift falls. Chief throws down some grenades that cause an explosion that kills the grunts. Launches Zamami out of his seat. He hits the ground just right to break his back and basically become paralyzed. And he sits there basically saying well, I guess it's time to go to paradise. And it's not clear if he dies there after the explosion or if he waits until the explosion of the actual autumn, I don't know. Either way, Chief makes it to the longsword after driving, and he gets aboard, escapes the ring just as the Pillar of Autumn detonates, destroying the ring. And here it's like Chief feels a bit of guilt, because Cortana confirms that him and her are what's left. There's no one else, and that they did what they had to do. And that Halo,
it's finished.
No, I think we're just getting started.
So that is the book. That is Halo the Flood. But before we start talking about my review of it all, let's talk about the adjunct. In this one, very similar to the Fall of Reach, there are 6 adjuncts that take up the very last bit. I will now tell you about them. The first one was cool. It was basically a log of everything that happened from the Fall of Reach to the destruction of Halo from Vel Vadim's point of view. It talks about how they came to Reach, try to set up a blockade, watched the Pillar of Autumn leave, chased it, determined its coordinates when it went into slip space, got there first. The Prophet of Stewardship tried to argue to Vel that now that there's a Halo ring involved, this went from a military matter to a religious matter, and therefore the Prophet of Stewardship was in charge. Vel was reluctant because he knows that the Pillar of Autumn is coming. And therefore, before the ring can have any sort of religious matter, they need to take care of the humans first. And so in this, we see the Prophet of Stewardship kind of become rebellious against Vel. He sends the expeditionary force to Threshold, to that former research facility, where you see the heretic leader on this research facility who's just sent here to study it, where he ends up meeting 343 Guilty Spark and then becoming the heretic leader. You see the Vel telling the Prophet he needs to back down while they deal with the humans, but the Prophet's like, nope, you're not going to get in the way of this. I will do what I want because this is a religious matter. So then it gets to a point where, a lot of stuff is happening. For example, one of the ships, known as the Infinite Succor, was attacked by an unknown entity. Artis Vadum, aka the beloved shipmaster, was sent to the ship to figure out what it was, where he comes in contact with the Flood. He then makes his way back to his own ship and warns them yo, we gotta be on alert. That was terrible. Aboard the Ascendant Justice, the Prophet of Stewardship then decides to leave this ship and go to the Truth and Reconciliation. He tells everyone aboard the Ascendant Justice yo, I'm in charge. So if anyone tries to interfere with our work, my work, you have permission to kill them, including the shipmaster. So then later on, Vel comes to the Ascendant Justice, but no one stops him. No one fights against him because they're all kind of you know what, dude? It makes more sense for Vel to be in charge because this is all going to shit. So no one attacks him. And later, Vel learns that the Truth and Reconciliation has been captured by humans and the Prophet of Stewardship has been captured. And the Prophet's calling for help. But Vel rejects the call because he knows that Halo's destruction is imminent and tells everyone to hide behind Threshold. So that was just the first one. And I liked that. It built a little bit more off this book. You then have the second adjunct, which is an audio recording from a private first class from the 79th Infantry aboard 79th Infantry Battalion aboard the Pillar of Autumn, who is leaving audio logs after coming in contact with the Flood. He's begging, screaming for someone to come save him, but no one's answering. And a lot of times in this, you just hear audio of things crawling around, things looking for him. And this dude's just crying and begging someone to come save him. And then just in the last moment, as he says, it's here, that they found me, you hear, or you read the audio log of the sound of a gunshot, and you realize that this dude killed himself rather than being taken by the flood. The third adjunct is so cool because it takes the perspective of a flood combat form who then finds a marine and starts to assimilate with it. And what's funny is when you have it to where this flood form is like running around trying to find something, you have it to where this is very similar to one of the Halo Waypoint Chronicles, which I will leave the name of right here, which was beautifully like read off by Alex Wakeford, where it just, this is what you would hear if you were this flood form. Sound, cold, hunger, hunger, sound, motion, cold, motion, hunger. Like, it's just, it's this flood form that like is hungry. Hunger is repeated a lot in here. But then when it reacts to something, it just says it. Cold, motion, barrier, light, sound, searching, texture. And eventually you see it jump, food, feast upon this marine that it discovered. And as it's eating or burrowing into this person's body, you hear the voices of the marine. And you hear the flood spore saying become, spine, pierce, change, feast, grow, become. And like this person starts being able to see its memories, but at the same time, he's panicking. He's begging, where's Johnson? Oh God, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Become, break, feast, tear, knit, burrow, become. And again, it's just this marine panicking. He's starting to see memories. He's starting to get confused of what's happening, where he is, what he's seeing, what is happening. And as it's going on, you see like in the italics, I know you can't actually see it, but the italics start to dwindle as the memories of this marine start to dwindle themselves. And eventually you just have it to where even the marine is starting to say the same words as the flood. One minute he's going from, oh God, Paul, I'm so sorry, to hungry, food, freedom, reach, hungry, forgive me. And then the flood just says, become, freedom, food, together, become, become, become. I don't know what it is about that story, but it's just, it gave me chills. It's eerie. It's perfect. I don't know. It's just cool to get these other perspectives of these species, like the hunters, but the flood? Oh, so well done to whoever wrote that. I need to find out the author. The fourth adjunct is interesting. It's almost like a biblical journal entry from Zuka Zamami of his perspective of things of the flood or of the game or the book, but like of him kind of having religious doubts and just almost like philosophical tellings of what is happening. Like one minute he's talking about, here, I'll just show it to you. Like one entry will be known as Revelation Salvation. And it'll be him talking about like, okay, I know why you've spared my life. And then he'll talk about like his salvation is the chief. And then adversity, perseverance, temptation, inspiration, doubt, concession. Each one of these entries is of him having like this religious talk with his gods and understanding that his duty right now is to kill the chief. It's all what this is about, is him coming to terms that he needs to kill the chief for the gods, which shows that Zuka is very much religiously devout to the point where he will do anything, kill anyone to ensure the great journey and to ensure his own salvation. I like it. It was good. The fifth adjunct is kind of Guilty Spark's reaction to a little bit of what's going on, especially when the flood get released. Just being annoyed that the flood's been released, not knowing what to do in this situation because he didn't expect this. He's been alone for 100,000 years, that when he expected life to come to Halo, he didn't expect two species to fight one another, and he didn't expect the Reclaimers not to know anything. He also doesn't really know what to do because now the flood is attacking. So what does he do? Ultimately, he decides that security of the ring and protocol take precedence. And therefore, he will do what he has to protect his ring, even if it means his own death. The sixth and final adjunct of this book was weird, because I was reading it, and it was kind of, I'll give you just my plain observation from it. It is a researcher observing species, different types different versions of it, and ultimately feeling guilty about like having to like study them and test on them and abduct them, but ultimately like knowing that this is what has to be done, but also not wanting to really do this. And so I was really confused because at the end of it, it just said L. And for some reason, my dumb brain could not think of anyone in the Halo universe that had the initial L. And I think the reason why I didn't think of who it is because I was expecting this to be more of a human or of some sort of alien in the modern day, the 2552 day, talking. So, thank you to Halopedia, where I researched it, and it turns out this is in fact basically a terminal of the librarian talking about her observations when cataloging the different life species on Earth. I do find this one to be a little random, a little like, okay. The other 5 had a lot to do with this book. What does this have to do with the book? Like, it just felt out of place, so that one I was more like, okay, cool. Maybe there's more to it, I'm being dumb, and maybe you're screaming at me going, bro, how do you not know this? But me personally, in that moment, I read it and I was like, yeah, that's cool. I don't see the importance though. All right, so that is it. That is The Flood. So let's talk about this book. Overall, this book is interesting to say the least. And the reason why is, one, it is a controversial book. A lot of people have a love-hate relationship with it. And I think I understand why. It really is 80 to 90% just the story of Combat Evolved with, of course, extra details. And it lays out a more canon layout of the game. Like, the things you do in the game aren't technically canon because the book exists. Whereas in Halo 2, the way you ran through the campaign can be canon. You'd be your own headcanon because that's how you played it. That's how you understood it. This book kind of says, that's cool, it's not how it worked. That isn't my problem with it though. My problem is with this. I think that had Dietz had just said okay to Bungie and made just a plain, full-on novelization of this book with none of the extra goodies that we got, this would have been a terrible book. Not to say it's badly written or that the author was terrible, but just to say that, like, why would you read this if you can just go play the game? And I think that's what the author was trying to convey to Bungie. Like, he himself said that sounded boring. He didn't want to do that. And if they had done it, he probably still would have done it because he was getting paid. But man, would he have hated it. He probably would have never cared about this book. But since he advocated for extra stories, extra characters, those were the interesting bits. Those really flushed out the story and made it feel more alive. And even in the podcast that I watched, the two people who conduct the podcast said something that I had thought immediately after I read the book. And you can go watch my YouTube short where I talk about this. The parts with Chief, I was bored with because I knew the story. I knew what was going to happen. Reading through it is just kind of like, okay. And honestly, my favorite frog on YouTube, who is a speedrunner, he would be mad about this. It took 72 hours, 74 hours. I have to go back and look. 74 hours for the entirety of the story to take place. Okay, I got my favorite frog over here running it in like less than 2 hours. Probably less than that. I don't even remember what his speedrun is. He'll yell at me if he ever sees this. Probably won't. But all I have to say is this. It's rough. It is a rough read when it comes to those Chief parts because if you've played Combat Evolved a billion times like I have, you're going to be bored. You're going to be like, I know this story. There are some bits where it's extra and it's cool, but it's not enough to really keep you engaged because then the 90% of it is just Chief running through it. There are times when he would skip parts. Like, not skip as to say they didn't happen, but like 1 minute Chief would be like, I've landed at Silent Cartographer. Then you would go read about Silva. And then suddenly Chief's talking about leaving the Silent Cartographer. Those parts were fine. I was like, cool. Yeah, you should do more of those major jumps and focus on these other characters. But of course, Bungie probably didn't want that. So overall, what I'm trying to say here is that those extra stories with Silva, Zamami, Yayap, oh my god, the Jenkins stuff had me intrigued because it was new, it was fresh. I wanted to see what happened. The Jenkins stuff, oh my god, I love Jenkins, and brother, he went through actual hell. He even said it. He went to hell without actually dying. And I was like... And so another thing I will say about this book is this. It's dated. It's clear that, you know, the author only had what he was given. I'm not actually going to... I would have said at one point, maybe when I was younger, that Dietz did a weird job with a lot of things, but to recognize that he only has so much control and information that Bungie gives him, that for what he did, for what he wrote, he did superb. And for those extra stories, oh, he killed it. There is one area that I do not like his writing. That's with the Master Chief. And I remember saying this as a kid when I first read this book. I don't like the Master Chief in this book. When he's in the normal spots that I've seen him in the games, it's fine. But when it's the author trying to expand upon the Chief's character, that I don't like. And the reason why is I just don't think that the vision Dietz had for who the Chief was fits with who the Chief is in literally any other book. We have it to where Chief is making more funny quips. And like here and there's fine. Chief does that in the games and the other books, but it's constant. And then you have it to where the Chief has real fear. Again, I know he's human and he's supposed to have human reactions, but sometimes it just doesn't fit the character, nor does it fit the moment that you see in the game. And it's one of those things where like when the author was writing the Master Chief, I could tell he didn't really have much of a blueprint. He had just the Fall of Reach and the game. There's not much to go off there just yet. Today, it might have been completely different. I think Kelly Gay did phenomenal with the way she wrote Chief in Edge of Dawn. I love the way Troy Denning writes about the Chief in Silent Storm, Shadows of Reach. But I have to say that this felt like the most un-Chief I have ever felt in any Halo media, minus the TV show. Yes, I know. Overall, the book is good if you're gonna go into this wanting extra stories, extra bits, expanded lore. But if you're gonna go into this wanting to read the story, I mean, unless you've never played Halo Combat Evolved, then yeah, this is a great book. But if you've played that game, I'm sorry, you're gonna hate it. You're gonna love those scenes when you're not on the Chief, but you're gonna hate it because 90% of it is the Chief. My last little irksome thing with the book is this. I get what they were trying to do. Almost each chapter is a mission. There are actually 2 more chapters than there are missions, but each section literally is like called 343 Guilty Spark, or the Silent Cartographer, or well, Halo. Like, it was trying to build each chapter as a mission. And each one had cool little concept art that you could see with it. Again, it doesn't make sense because it looks like Halo 2 Master Chief, but whatever. But what I hate as a reader, as someone who reads a lot of books outside of Halo, you know, I read history, politics, other sci-fi and fantasy. If you make a book where the chapters are forever long, I hate it. If you make a book where you're constantly changing character perspectives in the middle of paragraphs, I absolutely hate it. Because then after a while, I'm like, wait, who am I reading about? Because 1 minute it'll be like, the prophet or steward sat there smoking his pipe and blah, blah, blah. And that's why Cesar Rufumi decided to eat waffles. And I'm like, wait, what? When did we flip character perspectives? Like, that is the other thing I did not like about this book, is the length of the chapters and just the fact that character perspectives would change constantly in the middle of a paragraph and sometimes in the middle of a sentence. And it's like, who am I reading about? Who's my protagonist? Stop. So with that said, I recommend the book, but just understand it's a rough read. This is, again, no criticism to William C. Dietz, besides, again, maybe his overall philosophy for the Chief. That's the only thing I criticize him about. But again, it's only the 2nd book in the series. So again, give him some grace. But to whoever approved this at Bungie, as far as the story, just let Will cook next time. Let him, well, there's no next time, unfortunately, but just let them cook, okay? Don't make a novelization of a game ever again. I thought, hey, you know, maybe it would be cool to get other novelizations of the Halo games. Nope, don't do that. Please don't. I will read it, but I will be mad. So, what can you read, watch, and or do in order to prepare for Halo the Flood? Well, first and foremost, definitely read Halo the Fall of Reach. This is kind of a 3-book series. in all honesty, because you have the Fall of Reach, then you have the Flood, and you have First Strike. Each one of those books literally start and finish within each other, besides the Fall of Reach, of course. So like, it's like one long storyline. So if you're gonna prepare for this book in any capacity, you're gonna want to read the Fall of Reach, because there's a lot of characters in there that, you know, most of them are original to this book, but there are characters like Keyes, Lovell, Chief, and Cortana who talk about things from the previous book that if you didn't read it, you're not gonna really understand it. The other thing you're gonna want to read, and this is more complimentary, adds to the story, it's not necessarily required, but it will help flesh out more of Halo the Flood, is The Last Voyage of the Infinite Succor. That's the ship that I talked about at the very end of the adjunct with Ritus Vadum, our shipmaster, who engages with the Flood, and it's how he becomes Half-Jaw. So again, expands the story of Combat Evolved and expands the story of Halo 2. You're also going to want to read Breaking Quarantine, and that shows how Johnson himself escaped the Flood, got to a Pelican. Well, I don't know if it shows that, but it shows pretty much how Johnson survived when the Flood attacked in the mission 343 Guilty Spark. The other thing you could do is honestly just play Combat Evolved, because then if you really want to do it, and honestly, I would harbor no ill towards it, you could skip 90% of the book and just read those extra bits. It might confuse you because there are parts where it mentions what the Chief did that wasn't in the game, but for the most part, you would still get the story of what's happening with these other characters. It also, just reading it in full kind of adds to like the atmosphere of these extra characters. But overall, like, yeah, you can play Combat Evolved. It's the same story besides those extra bits. And you can't do this right now at the time of the recording of this video, but you can do it when it comes out. One thing you could read as a complement to this book, or you can read this to prepare for it, is Halo Parasite's Wake. Again, the character in it only has one page, so it's not that big of a deal, but you could definitely read this to fully understand what is going on in the context of that book. One other weird thing about this book is you can definitely tell that, I'm assuming Dietz obviously worked with Bungie. Not assuming. He did work with Bungie, and I'm sure they told him that their original plan was humans are Forerunners, because the way Chief reacts to some of the Forerunner technology, to the way 343 Guilty Spark talks to him. I mean, there's even extra bits in here of Guilty Spark pretty much being like, why are you being dumb right now? You understand all this. You've done this before. And it's kind of like, Chief's like, yeah, sure, I did that. So this is one of those books that can be used to make your claim that humans are Forerunners. But again, they're not. Not anymore. I agree with someone on Twitter. If you looked at these books from a purely Bungie-oriented lens, yeah, humans are Foreigners. That was their plan. But that was years ago. Matter of fact, Bungie hasn't been in charge of the lore for 16 years. I'm sorry. They're not the same. They're different. Sue me. But that is it for today's video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think of Halo the Flood if you've read it. Let me know, would you recommend it to new fans, old fans, or just if you would recommend it at all. But thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in Halo First Strike.